Nicky. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Big Questions live from the West London Academy Northolt. I'm Nicky Campbell. Parents are usually delighted when their children want to follow the family's faith, but it's often a different matter when a teenager or young adult chooses a new religious direction, especially if the organisation they have chosen to follow has a charismatic leader, very different beliefs, or results in total separation from the family. In other words, they fear their beloved child has been recruited into what some would call a cult. So this morning we're asking just one very big question. Is there a difference between a cult and a religion? And to debate it, we have some distinguished scholars, current members of several new religious movements, campaigners against cult techniques, concerned parents, and people whose lives have been changed forever. And they will be encouraged by our very lively London audience. As always, you can join in too. Just log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions, where you'll find links to continue this discussion online. So how would you categorize the following? Opus Dei, the Children of God, the Church of Scientology, the Unification Church, Branch Davidian, Jews for Jesus. Their members may think of them as a religion, but their critics have called them cults. Is there a difference between a cult and a religion? We've got Glenn Carter here. Hi, Glenn. Head of the Raelian movement in this country, so it's the equivalent of having the Archbishop of Canterbury on.
Oh, thank you very much.
Let's just go through your beliefs just to remind people. You believe that we're all descended from aliens who came to Earth known as the Elohim?
Elohim, yes.
Elohim.
I believe that life here was created by human beings, by scientists.
Right,
yes.
right. And Jesus and Muhammad
Were prophets of them.
and Buddha and Moses were all prophets who came from the Elohim.
Yes, yes.
And your founder, Claude Vorilon, Rael,
Yes.
he was not abducted. You wouldn't use the word abducted by aliens. He was contacted by aliens. What happened?
Yes, well, he was contacted. He went to a place and he was given a message to share with humanity, make no profit out of it, to make no money, just to publish the book and basically give it away, which is what he's been doing for 40 years.
And the message is?
The message is that life here was created by human beings, just like we as a scientific society are going forward and beginning to learn how to create life ourselves.
Is cloning's big in your
As cloning, however, creating unique life forms from scratch using genetic techniques, to then that we will, as we evolve in our scientific development, go out to other planets and create, like we have a biosphere in Britain, and we will go out and we will create unique indigenous life to a planet somewhere. That is what has happened here.
So we will be the Elohim of the future.
Exactly.
For other.
That is the never-ending cycle.
Right. Okay. And for you, it's immortality is through cloning.
Well, all we believe is that there is no ethereal God, no sort of mysticism in that respect. So what we believe is that there is only an afterlife if science creates one. That there isn't. We don't do our work. We're not evangelical at all. What people come to us, they find a book in a bookshop, or they search us out online. But if they come to help other people find that message, if they wish to, not for a reward of eternal life. That's because we don't believe there is one unless science creates one.
And how do you feel about the derision and the contempt that you get from, established religions, mainstream religions?
I feel a great deal of compassion for the mind that behaves in that way, to be honest with you. I feel sorry for people who hate without understanding, who condemn without really researching and trying to understand what I believe, and that it's benevolent. It's not in any way aggressive to anybody. As I say, we don't go out and grab people and induct people. People stay with their families. They live their lives. I'm an actor. I've been an actor for 30 years.
How's it affected your career since you were known as a Raelian?
Since I became publicly known as a Raelian, I went from being possibly the top 1 or 2% earners in my area of acting into being pretty much unemployable for doing nothing. I was the same person 10 years before that, but I haven't worked to the degree I used to work for 10 years now.
Really?
But that is a level of discrimination which I don't think is intentional. I don't say people that say he's in a cult, therefore he shouldn't be allowed to work.
Yeah.
I think people are fearful, and they say, because what I hear is that, oh, he's not necessarily a good member of a company. Or
so something's going. Francesca, is it, you know, people are derisive of beliefs like this. Is it any different from, some would argue it's no different from believing in a virgin birth or resurrection or whatever?
I think there's no difference at all between a cult and a religion in terms of what it's doing for the members of those religious groups. It's fulfilling
no difference.
No, the main. It's people think a cult is something that's different from the norm. But what's one religion to judge another religion? It's about size. Size matters, and I think it's about size. And as long as people aren't harming other people, I mean, that's an accusation that's made to cults, that they're harmful. But then mainstream religions can be harmful.
Francesca, what about all the academic material, I'm referring to academic material because you're a member of the academic community, that supports the argument that cults are using psychological coercion? We know what these techniques are, we know what the end result is,
exactly.
and we know what the impact on human life. So free choice is removed.
One second, are the Raelians dangerous?
The Raelians represent a group about which we're very concerned, and I would equate them with the Moonies. You mentioned the Jews for Jesus earlier, and that I would see in a different category altogether and not a problem. But for legal reasons, I have to word things in a particular way because these groups have a tiresome habit of suing.
Could you say what the problem with the Raelians is, so that we understand why you have a concern about them?
I have to...
Because I know nothing about them.
You have to couch this in delicate language.
I have to word things very, very carefully
of course.
because I might have to prove certain things I could say in a court of law.
But what is it that
what I
bothers you
can
about
say
them?
is that the same concerns that families have that call me when they have loved ones who've become involved in one of the groups about which we're concerned, in terms of those loved ones becoming alienated, changing for the worse and so on, are the same things that we've heard about people who've become involved in the Raelians. And I've talked to people who are ex-members of the Raelians.
What you're actually using there are psychological manipulative techniques to turn the opinion of an audience against the Raelian movement. Even now, just wait 1 second. You're saying I could offer information, but I can't just in case. But take it from me, I'm a scholar, that you and those people are bad. What you haven't done is say anything that's real. You've just passed an opinion. You've used manipulative techniques to do that. And yet I am sat here. 1 second. Yet I am sat here being honest with you. Be honest with me.
Glenn, thank you.
Let me talk about
Rabbi in a minute.
The group represented by our friend next door to you.
Talk about the Raelian movement.
The Unification Church.
The Unification Church was involved in a landmark case in 1980. It finished up in the High Court where the Moonies sued the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail won the case. The Daily Mail had accused the Moonies of what it described as brainwashing and breaking up families, and it proved its case in the High Court.
Brainwashing is impossible.
We're not talking about an academic debate here. We're talking about something that's been proven
I think if we're going to go back,
the legal system.
Simon.
If we're going to go back in time a bit, I mean, one of the interesting things is Reverend Moon told the British leadership very clearly, don't sue on this. It's a waste of time. It's not good.
And a mistake was made.
We lost the court case, and then the government set up a commission to investigate our charitable status, and they did way more work on that than they did in the court case, on the libel case. And their final conclusion, there was no case to be had for our charitable status. Let me finish what I'm saying. And I've forgotten who it was from the anti-new religious movement.
You won't say the C word, will you?
Who spoke in the libel case, but certainly an MP made an apology in the House of Commons for what he said in the libel case about our movement. And interestingly enough, just about a couple of years ago, we buried the hatchet with the Daily Mail. We buried the hatchet with a lot of media organisations that we've had a lot of misunderstanding with. And I think new religious movements can be a bit like a little bit obnoxious teenagers sometimes, in that they're not very good at communicating everything they're trying to get across. But
all right. Listen, we'll come to you a little bit more later on, Simon. I want to investigate exactly what the difference is between a religion and a cult. Aren't religions, Rabbi Shockett, just successful cults?
No, because a religion in the first instance is predicated on the belief in a deity, and a cult in the first instance is predicated usually on the belief in a particular man who concocted something which he then chose to define as a religion, and invariably then preys on people, on the vulnerable in particular, looks to lure them in, It's often about being able to create a certain kind of power, money base, and whatever else besides.
On that basis,
but let me just say this. Let me just say this. That's the essential difference between.
We'll come to that.
That is the essential difference between.
That
That is the essential difference between a religion and a cult. And I'll only say then this on that basis. I think it's wrong that you should have been discriminated against in your work on account of your personal beliefs. That shouldn't have happened for whatever the reasons, fear or whatnot. My single issue with any cult or any person's individual belief is when you go out there and you look to lure other people, whether out of other faiths or out of no faith, and get them to try and embrace your belief.
Like you believe the Jews for Jesus? Wait, like the Labour Party, he said. You believe the Jews for Jesus do this, don't you?
The Jews for Jesus do this in a very big way.
Jews for Jesus.
Jews for Jesus are a bunch of Jewish people who've come to see that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. We believed, as you all know, classic Christian belief, that Jesus died for our sins, rose from the dead. This is what we believe. And we're like, so who would I share this with? I'd share it with my people, with other Jewish people, just like me. So I believe he's the Jewish Messiah. If somebody doesn't want to talk to me, I don't lure them, I don't try. I stand on the street, I wear a big t-shirt so everyone knows exactly what I believe. And I say, hey, what do you think about Jesus? Don't want to talk? Don't talk. Want to talk? Let's talk more.
But I don't stand on the street and stop, I don't know, vulnerable Christians or whoever else besides and say, hey, what do you think about Judaism? I don't look to lure them into my faith.
That's your choice.
That's cool. It's up to you, man.
I grant you that, but that's why I say anything that essentially takes away other people's critical thinking, and particularly, and I know a lot about Jews for Jesus over the years, and I've encountered so many of them, particularly those who are vulnerable and have their minds, if you like, ensnared in some kind of brainwashing technique. And
but what's that different about bringing up a child in your religion and the fact that they're born in that religion, they grow up in that religion, they know nothing else? In what way is their mind not ensnared in a sense?
They are always left with an open mind to be able, and there are many, sadly, if you like, Jews who may walk away from their Jewish faith. I know, again, categorically that Jews for Jesus uses clear brainwashing techniques, befrienders, what have you, things that are done to ensnare them.
But you just believe you've got good news, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I just hang out with people in coffee shops. It's, Starbucks, Costa, these are my offices. This is where I hang out with people. I don't really use a technique other than, the Bible, I suppose.
Jews for Jesus is a deceptive term.
Really?
That's one of the problems.
Why is Jews for Jesus a deceptive term, Doctor?
Because to be Jewish, you don't believe in Christ, okay? So Jews for Jesus is a deception that Jewish people can retain their Judaism while believing in Jesus Christ. And they use many deceptive techniques. They have people that they say are rabbis who were never rabbis and were never Jewish. And they target the Jewish community during vulnerable times such as Christmas, when it's very alienating to be Jewish. It's like the entire world is Christian. And they run advertisements at those times to reach people who might be in pain.
Are they dangerous?
Are they dangerous?
Yeah.
They're dangerous to particular people if they alienate them from their families and if they're using deceptive techniques.
And if we ever use a deceptive technique, I'd love somebody to let me know.
The name itself is
okay, well, let me ask you this question. Jesus is Jewish. All the disciples were Jewish. And if he is the Jewish Messiah, what could be more Jewish than believing in Jesus? I mean, what could be more Jewish? Now, you disagree he's the Messiah. You disagree that he died to cover your
You need to give Rabbi
fine.
Shockett a leaflet. While we're on the subject of, Christina, while we're on the subject of Jesus, I'd like to quote the Bible to you, I know, and a book of which you are a big fan. Jesus said, and this was Matthew chapter 10, verse 37, "He that loveth father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." That's a pretty cultish message from Jesus.
The very interesting thing was when I was looking at cults for a very different idea, I realized that the description of the classical cult is to have a charismatic leader, Jesus, who is Muhammad, who is saying to his followers, this is a radical teaching, and you've got to leave your family, you've got to leave everything that feels comfortable and that you know, and you must go forth, and you will find that you are alienated from your surroundings. So all of that sounds like a cult, or it sounds like a religion. But the thing that none of us have mentioned is values. What religion asks you to do is to live by your day-by-day values. Values that are transcendental, that, you know, ask yourself, when somebody says to you, are you a member of a cult or are you a member of a religion? Ask yourself, what do I do for others? Because that's what religion asks. What cults ask is, what are you doing for me, your leader? What are you doing for us, our little group?
Let me bring Francesca back, then I'll come to you, Livingston. Francesca, respond to that point, the difference, a clear difference that Christina has identified.
I think it's very hard to say that religions rather than cults ask, what do you do for other people? There are a lot of cultic movements that do an awful lot of charity work, for example. So I don't think it's a fair distinction to draw.
But charity is not the only...
But no, for example, but the main point is about perceptions of damage, and it's outside perceptions of damage versus inside perceptions of damage.
What do you mean by inside perceptions of damage?
Is what I was about to tell you. Is the person within this particular religious group being damaged somehow, psychologically, physically, sexually? And you can't draw a distinction there either between a religion and a cult. For example, we all know that, I mean, it's people that are dangerous, not necessarily religions per se or cults per se. It's the people within them. So if you've got someone on a power trip within a Christian church or within a Jewish community, you may as well have a person who's on a power trip in any other kind of way.
Yes, except
In a minute, John. Christina.
Except that with a religion, you have a much wider body, which will rein in the power crazy thing.
This is the key point. A religion and a cult, the main difference is size. That's the main difference.
Not at all.
Not at all.
We just talk
Some
about the
cults
definite...
are very small as well.
We've got a clear thing there. The main difference is us. We'll all get a chance. It's a long program on one topic. Don't worry. But Livingston's been trying to come in, and I want to speak to Livingston. I want everyone to hear Livingston's story. Livingston, you were at Waco.
That's correct.
That 51-day siege, you lost members of your family in the siege, in the fire. You then served 14 years for your role in defending...
Well, actually, we were...
And David Koresh was the man in defending the center and defending his mission. You believe that he was a prophet. He saw an angel, didn't he?
That's correct. On a visit to Jerusalem in 1985. And that's how he came by the message that was the essence of our group, which takes me back to something that Christina said. I understand the values part that you spoke of, and we embrace those too. But it was the pursuit of the truth, the knowledge of God, that was the principal driving force.
And what was David Koresh like? Give us an idea.
Well, much like you.
There you go.
I doubt it.
Oh, you don't play the guitar. I suppose that's the only difference, huh?
Okay, they say these leaders are charismatic, these cult leaders are charismatic.
Not in the sense of those stereotypes.
No, okay.
Is no different than you're a person who's sincerely trying to find God. And you're putting your entire being in that effort.
And it's all about the end times.
If that makes you charismatic, then okay.
Okay. But people followed him because the message was the important.
No. It's not him that was followed.
It's the message.
The truth.
The truth.
The same truth that those who were there, the members who were there, was the same truth that David followed. David was merely the point of reference through which that truth was given.
Right.
By reason of the fact that he had that initial experience by which the truth came. Now, we can go into a dissecting of that. From that, you get a better understanding of what. But
you very much believe that message is true now as it was then, and it's an eternal truth.
Absolutely.
And we are in the end times.
Indeed.
You don't look back and you say that was madness. You absolutely stand by everything.
Absolutely. There is no reason for... As a matter of fact, the events that have unfolded since then, in the 20 years since Waco, have corroborated all that we held true in terms of what's going on in the world right now and what is to come as a result of the events that are now unfolding. So it encompasses a worldview. It actually extends way into the future. The Messianic kingdom that will go on for another 1,000 years, and from then we go into eternity itself. This is a hope, the hope for mankind in the present situation. Now, only as you can see it in the context of the truth that we held can you really understand why the events of 1993 turned out the way they did.
Why did they have to separate themselves into a compound? Why was that necessary?
Well, it's no different to going to a university. Your children come and they go to university, except that we're dealing with spiritual truths.
What about the guns that were stockpiled?
I understand. I knew you would come to that.
It seems relevant. Why were the guns there?
Well, for one, we were called that we would be attacked. So the objective of the guns was as a deterrent. Now you got to understand this in the context.
You were called that you would be attacked. How do you mean?
Well, part of our message dealt with prophecy.
But you were attacked by the agency because of the guns.
Well, that's
the
what
Alcohol,
they,
Tobacco and Firearms Agency.
That's what they said.
David wasn't a very good prophet, though, was he? Because he couldn't prophesy what actually happened.
I
think
that's very unfair.
In fairness,
In
fairness here, we're talking about
if you're going to make
beliefs.
a statement like that and then just jump to something else, let me address it.
We're talking.
When you say David was not a good prophet,
I'm just picking up on a single issue that you mentioned. Most of this, as far as I'm concerned, is irrelevant because I would fight for your right to believe whatever you choose, as long as you choose it. The issue is, what is the difference between a cult and a religion? We're talking about the difference
between... Was this
between...
a cult, clearly?
We're talking...
Was this a cult?
We're talking about a group there that was certainly of concern, and I would have had the same concerns about it as I did at the time, as I do about the other groups that we've referred to earlier today. We're talking about a difference here between conversion and coercion. I mean, Rabbi, you talked about the problems associated with evangelism and proselytizing. My understanding is that the word proselyte meant someone who had converted to Judaism originally. But that practice did cease, by and large, in the majority of the Jewish community a few hundred years ago. There are still some that do proselytize, but only within the Jewish community. There's nothing wrong with proselytizing. There's nothing wrong with sharing your perspective.
Sharing the message.
And giving people a chance to exercise free choice.
Well,
what we're concerned with is that cults remove free choice and do so very effectively through the use of techniques of psychological coercion.
You keep using that phrase, they remove your blah, 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 blah,
very
blah. To me, it's just a blah, blah. But the thing is, you don't actually know that, because, I mean, I run the Raylan movement in this country, and we don't do anything other than what we're doing now, which is debate.
Exactly.
We debate and we talk about ourselves, and we run campaigns against things like paedophilia, against bad behaviour and the oppression of human beings. Yeah. And yet you're sat there saying that we're concerned about groups like this. Well, I'm concerned about you. And I could just as easily cast aspersions over your good name by saying, I've heard things about you that I'm not prepared to, excuse me, that I'm not prepared to say in this programme, but I've heard things about your sexual habits.
Well, this
what I'm saying is those things.
I mean, that's outrageous.
What I'm saying is those.
That's outrageous to say something like that.
What I'm saying is those things are easy to say. They are easy to say. They're not very easy to back up. And what I'm saying is that is exactly the technique. That is exactly the technique. That is exactly the technique that you are using over my philosophy.
I want to come on to one of our learned colleagues, Professor. Wait a minute, Professor. We have, without casting any more aspersions about each other. Professor, we had something really fascinating there from Livingston. It was all about truth. This is the truth. And is there something in that various groups, whether they are be a religion or a cult, we can get the situation where they think they have a monopoly on the truth.
Can I just
and that's what we're getting at. One second, let's get Professor on this.
Well, most of the time, I would say that all organisations have the propensity to be manipulative or to damage people. Absolutely. And it's about organisational practices, not about beliefs. And groups are all on a continuum. Not all groups end up with mass suicides, thankfully, not all organisations. But the fact is that on occasions, the belief system, if it does take over people psychologically, and there is evidence for that in the literature, it doesn't happen in all religious groups, it doesn't happen in all groups that are on the cultic spectrum. But when it does happen, as with the Branch Davidians, it can have catastrophic effects on individuals and on their families.
There's a statement that Christ made 2,000 years ago. I and the Father are one. In the pursuit of truth and of God, it is designed to bring us into a being or a state of being that is in harmony with the divine. Now, if the world and everything about the world is out of kilter with God, then obviously those who pursue that are going to seem by the world to be different.
Francesca, are the problems here inherent in people taking things in the Bible literally? Because with every respect to Livingston, Revelations is the true word of God as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point about monopoly is absolutely right.
Truth,
we have exactly. Some people think they have an exclusive access to this divine truth that's revealed in the Bible, but the Bible is a very contradictory collection of texts.
Francesca, I don't believe you believe that.
I do believe that.
I don't believe
She's an academic.
I know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
It's a very
that's
complex
problematic.
collection of texts.
That's problematic.
Cole Morton.
I feel sorry for you.
Cole Morton. Isn't it fascinating here in Livingston?
It really is. It's fairly clear.
I'm a guy who was at Waco.
Yes, and I would be fascinated to spend an hour talking to Livingston on his own about what happened at Waco and the ramifications of that. I think what's really interesting in the wider debate here is that we're in a culture at the moment, a society where people on the whole, en masse, have said, look, we don't want to belong, we don't want to be part of an organisation. Even the Church of England, which is about as mild as it gets in the religious spectrum, we don't want to be part of that. And yet within that circle, there are groups that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they're preaching certainty. And the ones that are attracting the most attention are the ones that are absolutely giving you certainty. Now, I understand that because as a teenager, I embraced a group that was absolutely about certainty. And some days, I'm nostalgic for it, frankly. I wish I could go back and know exactly who I was and what I was trying to do.
It was a missionary group, was it? What are you missing? What's lacking now?
Wake up in the morning and you know exactly what you're doing, exactly where you're going, exactly what you believe in, and what you're meant to do about it. That's tremendously liberating, actually. And I'm nostalgic for it. I don't believe many of the things upon which that was based at the time, but I'm nostalgic for the sense of purpose.
But you could say that about some of the great monotheistic religions. The precepts are laid out, you know what to do, you know how to do it. Francesca, you're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not really that easy. I mean, I've got a faith with absolutes in it, and there's a theology around it, but I don't wake up every morning feeling completely purposeful. And I think.
Perhaps you want to look for another one then.
Can I answer that? Can I answer that?
Yeah, of course you can.
I just signed up for a course at Holy Trinity Brompton's theology course because I'm a pastor. I've got a congregation of 165 people.
For the Unification Church of.
And I haven't got any formal theological training, so I can see a lot of the things that the established church has done and is doing are things that I don't have in my organisation, and I think there's a lot for us to learn from the established faith, and I think there's things from the established faith to learn from the newer faith. And I think, of course, we're sitting here like in the Houses of Parliament, with a line down the middle, and I think a personal relationship with God is too precious and important for us to start playing power politics with his name and start.
Well, you talk about power politics. I hope you won't think me impertinent, but the Reverend Moon has been accused, your founder, of being the ultimate sort of power junkie because he became he saw God, he saw Jesus, or was it an angel? Which was
he had a personal experience of Jesus around Easter when he was a Sunday school teacher, as a teenager.
And Jesus told him the truth that he had to relate to the rest of the world.
Well, he had a conversation with him, and from that various revelations came out.
And from that various revelation, he became a very wealthy man, didn't he?
Well, the movement's a big worldwide movement. He's personally not a person of wealth, I don't think, no. That's one of the, the Archbishop of Canterbury is much richer in terms of the body and size of his organisation, so I think that's a really unfair.
And the Reverend, when he had children, the Reverend Moon and his wife, his children were the first children ever to be born without original sin, is that right?
Well, I didn't come on a programme to have people sit behind me sniggering.
Well, people need to understand the beliefs. People need to understand the beliefs.
But, answer the question then.
His children were the first to be born ever without original sin.
We have a theology.
3 of them committed suicide, no?
Sorry?
3 of the kids committed suicide.
We have a theology about the message that he got from Jesus, that Jesus asked him to continue his work, that he went a path that, if you want to study it, you can study it, that was an incredible path, and he has a vision to create the family that was lost.
Children who are without original sin, and he kicked that off.
Children, people have their own responsibility. His children are far from perfect. There's been lots of mistakes, and our movement is far from perfect. I don't hold my movement up to be the answer to world salvation, but I think our faith has a lot to contribute, and I think if we could get away from a bit of the antagonism, if I could, have a bit of time in Starbucks with Ian, like our friend over here does with his friends.
You're on.
Okay.
We'll meet.
I've been leading the last 4 years the unification movement in the UK, and one of my main policies has been transparency. I put all our accounts up on the web. I put my own wage up there. I put, all the things. And I think if we get a bit more transparent with each other and really know what each other's lives are like. When I walked into church this morning, a girl from my music team told me about an illness her father has. And because I could see she wasn't so happy. So that's what real people in real religions are dealing with. Communities, families, helping people to grow, helping people to change their lives so that they can be happier.
Does that extend to a duty of care to every single member of your organisation? Because like Ian, I've spoken to countless ex-members of the Unification Church or movement who talk of being isolated from their families, talk about the way in which the church took over their lives, the fact that if they try and leave, people try and... countless examples. Over many decades. If you're saying...
In the last 10, 20 years?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Now, if you're saying your movement's reforming, that's a great thing. And if you're looking after all of your members, in that case, would you allow psychologists such as myself to actually work with your organisation to test whether members are actually functioning healthily, like all organisations?
I had an organisational psychologist.
We'll come to you in a minute, Livingston. That's good. That offer's been accepted. Let's hear from people who said, gentlemen at the back, what would you like to say? We'll go to the audience. Quick comments.
One of the things I've noticed is, I'm an atheist, but I saw a quote by Buddha, and it would deal with all the cults, hands down. It says, do not believe anything because you see it, because it's you read it in a religious book, because religious teachers say so, and includes because I say so. In other words, Buddha said, if I say something stupid, it's stupid. Do not follow anything. Always use your own common sense, your own reason, your own sense of fairness. Do not believe anything. And in regards to truth, well, there's a TV show, it's called Mythbusters, where they go and test out things like, can a mouse scare an elephant? So get an elephant, get a mouse, and go prove every single thing you say once and for all. So there's no accepted truths. It's the same like, don't smoke because all your friends do. It's the same principle with religions. And like you said, it's just a case of size. Or is the leader dead or not?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good morning.
As a Muslim, we define religion as, like the rabbi did say, around the Creator. This Creator is everlasting. He has no beginning, he has no end. He's the creator of everything in existence.
Do you think Islam started as a cult?
No, it wouldn't have, because before Islam, there were other religions before Islam.
Do you think it started as a cult?
No, I didn't, but you know that only 2 years ago, the governor of Tennessee was trying to brand Muslims as part of a cult. And I think that what we haven't discussed yet is how threatened organized religions and atheists like Francesca feel by new religions. And why do they feel threatened? They feel threatened because things are really askew, as you put it. The economy is in a total state of collapse. Global economy is doing badly. People are without work, people are without hope, and we are latching on to anything that offers spiritual guidance.
Okay, gentlemen over here, yeah.
Say something, Livingston, about Blanche Davidians. One thing you forgot to mention was the sexual abuse that went on in Waco. David Koresh would come down and talk to his congregation about some of the young children he sexually abused that day. I don't know how you can condone that. You said you haven't changed. I don't have to tell you my name. But this is...
Mine.
Yeah, it's on the record. Yeah, it's on the record, Livingston. He sexually abused children at Waco. I don't know how you can still say you're a Blanche Davidian.
I didn't really come here for that.
I didn't know he was going to say it.
No, but that's the problem. You didn't come here for that. You didn't come here for that.
If you let me finish.
He has one man who says what he heard from Jesus. You've got another man who heard what he heard from Jesus. He's got another man with his own interpretation from Jesus. Will the real one please stand up?
That's why we need to look at the methodology.
Right, Livingston.
I wanted to come back to the issue of cults and religion. I understand what you're saying, and I understand how you might even perceive that, but it's not as you perceive it. And here's the thing: did you question the person that put that in your mind?
You're trying to tell me sexual abuse didn't go on
in Waco? No. I'm not trying to tell you that. What I'm trying to say to you...
You know sexual abuse went on there.
Livingston, let me ask you. Did sexual abuse go on at Waco?
No.
No?
No.
Look me in the eye and say that. No? Okay.
No. Now let me finish. No, hold on. Let me ask you the question.
I don't necessarily believe it, but he looked me in the eye and he said it.
Let me ask you a question. Did you question the persons that put that in your mind?
There are several witnesses. to it. David Koresh would regularly sexually abuse young children at Waco, and he would come down to his congregation and he would talk about
All
it.
right.
And he said that
Now,
he was
when
justified
David
to do it
Koresh
because of his
actually,
religion.
when David Koresh actually presents that with you, to you, and it turns out that your belief was
David
incorrect.
Koresh is dead.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. When he actually presents that to you, and it turns out that your belief was incorrect, are you prepared to take the consequences for that afterwards?
All
right, that's all I'm here to find.
It's on the FBI record.
Listen, the accusations of you really, I mean, Livingston, you absolutely believe you will, this gentleman will have to take the consequences of saying that about a man who was sent from, as a prophet from God. That's fascinating. Sexual abuse is often seen as, and sexual exploitation as at the very heart of many of these movements, these new religions, or some of them that have been referred to as cults by some people. And Juliana, growing up in the Children of God, you went through hell, didn't you?
Yes. I just want to take it back to the whole question that we're actually here to discuss, which is the difference between cult and a new religious movement.
Before we get to that, but people who don't know, because you know everything about the Children of God, you were born into the Children
Yes.
of God. Many people watching at home might not be so well acquainted. David Berg, another man who saw Jesus,
Yeah.
or was visited by
It's
an
the standard fare. They all think they are the mouthpiece of God, and they all have a handle on the Almighty's will.
Right.
And everybody sort of follows him as the figurehead of God. And so, you know, with that...
And there was a lot of child abuse in the movement.
There's a lot of child abuse, but, you know, it's interesting that it's not something that people go into thinking, okay, I'm going to join a cult, I'm going to, you know, abuse children, I'm going to, you know, do this and this and this. It's a steady conditioning that happens over a period of time. And I think there's a lot of scientific and psychological studies that have been done on the effects of groupthink, of when people are put into an isolated environment with extremist ideas or beliefs, what is possible for a normal human being to do to another human being. You know, there have been I think everybody knows the standard, you know, the Stanford prison test, or, you know, the Milgram's obedience test. Even Nazi Germany, you know, what happened on a massive scale to an entire race of people, you know, but they were doctors who were, you know, slaughtering children. They were, you know, people who would normally be in caring professions. It can happen to anyone, but the problem, as I see it, is that, you know, there's so much hair splitting over this idea, is that, oh, are they a new religious movement? What should we call them? Should we call them a cult? Should we call them a, you know, a high demand organization? It's not. It's drawing attention away from the bigger issue, which is we need to look at the effects of what their belief system. Are they harming people? Are they harming other people in the group? Are they taking away people's liberty? Are they controlling people's information? Are they keeping people within
How old were you when you thought this is wrong?
I honestly never believed. I was never a believer. I never considered myself a member. I was born into it without choice. And this is there's a large demographic of children around the world born into these groups
when you saw
who aren't given a full picture of the world. They're only
when you saw that sexual abuse around you. Why did as you grew up and it happened to you? And why didn't you go to the authorities? Why couldn't you go to the authorities? Were you a prisoner?
Well, yeah, you're kept within a compound, very much like Waco, where you're behind walls.
No, not very much like Waco.
How do you know?
I was there.
Do you know David? I was in mine, and you know David Berg glorified David Koresh and called you all martyrs.
Sure.
David Berg called them martyrs.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he said that we probably would suffer a similar fate as you.
And what about I think this is key actually. What about the attitude to people in the Children of God to those who were not? In other words, the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, within these groups, it's very much an us versus them mentality. So. You know, you feel justified in feeling superior to everybody else because you have the truth. And
what did you call people who were not in the movement?
They were called the systemites.
Systemites?
Yeah. The police were called Romans, and people who were who we thought we could convert into the group were called sheep, which is interesting because in society, there's the sheep and there's the shepherds. There's the followers and there's the leaders. There's the controlled and there's the controlling.
What has been explained? I'm sorry, what was her name?
Juliana.
What you've explained there in what you've experienced, and I hope it hasn't had too negative effect on you.
Not at all.
That is not, okay. That does not characterize Waco. That does not reflect how things were with us.
I don't know the exact dynamics of what went on.
No, but what I'm saying, you made a comment. You made a comment.
Let me ask Juliana then. Let me ask Juliana, how has it affected you?
Well, okay, for me, it's been a journey towards what I believe in my own person. But I know that other kids from my social dynamic have struggled much more than I did. And there's a very high suicide rate. Just in the first 2 months of this year, there was 4 suicides from my group, the youngest being 16. They have a very difficult time adjusting into society when they leave. They're not given the mechanisms to adapt into society. They're generally not given a good education, certainly not a formal one that they can get a job with. They're often denied medical care. There's a whole environment where there's not enough of a transparency within these groups. There are no child protection policies in these groups, and this is where harm can happen.
You have survived.
Can we not just lump all of these groups together? Because, I mean, half of my congregation, they're all across the park at Imperial College. Everyone's moved out of living in missionary centres. Everyone's got their own house, they've got a job, they work for a bank, they're a bus driver.
Exactly the same in the radio.
I mean, I think.
But this is why I don't believe that we should be lumping everyone together. We need to look at the effects of particular groups, what's happening within particular. You can't say that all of them are harmful.
So we need to look at the methodology. Ian Howard.
This issue of sexual abuse has come up. Juliana has talked about that in the group she was in. I actually challenged a member, a leader actually, of that group, the Children of God, about the sexual abuse, and they said, oh, there's no sexual abuse here. Yeah. Another ex-member said later, well, of course, because we didn't define it as abuse.
Yeah.
We said if we were having sexual relations with children, that was done in love, and therefore it wasn't abuse. Well, I mean,
so Rabbi Shockett, what are the bad effects been? Psychologically, the brain is a very vulnerable organ, isn't it?
It is indeed. But let's be very clear. There's a lot of banter here about believing in or having monopoly on truth. In essence, logically, rationally, if you belong to any particular faith, you have to obviously believe that that is absolute truth to the exclusion of all others. Otherwise, you have no business believing in that faith in the first instance. The problem is, hang on, the problem is when it spills over into excess such that you then have disregard for people of other faiths and say that if you're not a member of my faith, then you are just not a good human being and that you serve no purpose in life. That's where it all goes wrong. And essentially, if you go around over here amongst this front row, when they're sitting in Waco, as far as they're concerned, unless I embrace that way of life, then essentially I'm damned to hell. Frankly, as far as he's concerned, if I don't embrace Jesus, I'm damned to hell as well. And that's where there is the problem.
Is he damned to hell?
That is not true.
No, he says you're not damned to hell.
No,
and you don't believe in the New Testament?
I do. Hang on a second. It's ridiculous. See, the thing is, we all have to recognize, and this is where we start, for me, we all have to recognize we all fail. We're all messed up people. None of us are perfect. All right. Now, I believe that the only way of having those failures covered over.
The only way.
Yeah, the only way is through Jesus. Right. So I don't believe that Jesus is going to send me to hell if I don't believe in him.
Is he going to send him to
hang on.
Answer the question.
Let me finish the sentence.
Answer the question. If I don't embrace Jesus, what's my destiny?
If you continue living the life that you live, like anyone
else,
like all of us,
sinful life that you live.
No, but all of
I've
us.
seen you drinking whiskey.
It's true.
And it was
and I am just as messed up, probably more messed up than the rabbi, right? In my life. But the problem is, I think that God sent out this way of mercy. So it's not God that actually sends me to condemnation. I send myself to condemnation. And God's the one that saves.
But you didn't answer my question.
Can I answer that question?
You can answer it. Levis is going to answer your question. Then I'm going to move on to a comparatively new religion which calls itself a church but is nothing to do with God. Answers on a postcard. That's just in a minute.
Rabbi Shockett, that judgment is left to God. Not to him, not to me, not to any other human being. Even Christ says, remember Matthew 7, judge not, lest you be judged, for whatever judgment you meet, be meet to you.
Or is it left to your subjective interpretation of what God said, which can be very different to his subjective
interpretation? So you judge my interpretation to be subjective.
To what his interpretation
you judge my interpretation to be subjective. That's your judgment of me.
And that's why every movement and every cult and every religion should be held up to scrutiny. And if there's objective criteria by which to determine the authenticity of the faith, then great. If not, it falls down.
Everything.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Some people in new religions speak in emphatic terms about everything. Wait a minute, everybody. Let's move on. Let's move on, Admiral. I'll get a chance to come back to you, hopefully. Right, okay. If not in this life, in the next. All right? But we John. I know that, Glenn. John, former Scientologist.
Yes.
Right. What's the leaving like?
It's a very baffling experience, particularly, and I think this may be something that defines a cult, because of the attack that you receive from the group. because when you're expelled, you're shunned, you're disconnected from.
Now, let's just make it clear at this stage.
And Episcopalians don't do that.
I'm going to make it clear on your behalf. We're not generalising. We're not saying all these groups are like this. We're talking about this particular
Yes, and that's
group.
great, and that's perfect. But I think what's not coming clear from what I'm hearing is people are saying here, what's happening with cults is this, is this, is this. And yet I'm classed in this meeting as a cult. And I'm telling you
now,
we
are identifying problematic techniques that are sometimes used, and let's further explore
them. And I agree with
those.
that, and it's a valid thing. But
let's explore
clarity
them with
is
John.
important.
All right.
Could I perhaps interpose a definition?
That'd be nice.
This is from the American Family Foundation in 1985. A cult, a totalist cult, to give it a full definition, is a group or movement exhibiting a great or excessive devotion or dedication to some person, idea or thing, and employing unethical, manipulative or coercive techniques of persuasion and control.
That's the key bit.
Designed to advance the goals of the group's leaders to the possible or actual detriment of members, their families, or the community. And I'm not accusing anybody of being a cult.
I want to hear a story. I want to hear a story, and I'll come to you if I can. Right, okay. So you had to pay quite a lot of money to progress through the courses over a number of years.
I met somebody who'd given $2 million to Scientology and ended up in hospital.
And you eventually qualified, you paid for courses to progress up the 26 levels, and you reached the level whereby you were made privy to the secret.
Yes.
What's the secret?
The secret is that we're all composed of millions of little beings. We're not individuals, and so our thoughts and our feelings are confused by this. And so the idea is to extract ourselves from these clusters of little beings. Body thetans, yes.
Yeah, which came from an intergalactic war.
Yes. 75 million years ago, in the sector of the galaxy.
You're channeling L. Ron Hubbard now, aren't you?
Very nearly, yeah.
So, why, just supposing, let's take a leap of imagination, just supposing this is nonsense, this thetan business, just supposing it's not true for 1 second, why do sane, rational, intelligent human beings buy it, literally, and buy into it?
Well, it's a secret. I'd been a member for 7 years before this was put to me. So, you know, I'd gone along that road for a long way. And in fact, the day that I opened the pack to these materials, I said, this is like Colin Wilson's novel, The Mind Parasites. It didn't make sense to me. But I said, I've been on this road for 7 years. I'll check it. I'll see. And I still never did feel convinced. And 2 years later, I left.
And how long is it? Are you still getting over it?
No. It's nearly 30 years ago since I left. But I think the problem with people who leave is they often consider the emotional experiences they had rather than questioning the truth of the teachings. Yeah. Scientology claims to be scientific. So if you look at its tenets and discuss them openly, you find it's not scientific.
And L. Ron Hubbard, he said he preached against drugs. That's no bad.
Yet he himself admitted to having been a barbiturate addict in a lecture. And he tried to cash prescriptions in East Grinstead in the 60s so that he could give barbiturates to plants, he said.
But this is interesting, isn't it? You don't know, Christina, you don't know what it's about until you're... Well, everyone knows now the secret's out. Not here, but previously.
Read my book.
That's one of the best plugs I've ever heard. But you don't know the secret until you're well into it, Christina.
Yes, that's true. And I think
you don't really know what the beliefs are.
But that is a very good magnet for people who are feeling vulnerable and confused. The mystery, the unfolding mystery.
Seduced.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet when viewing it from a distance, Judge Leahy in the mid-80s described it as corrupt, sinister and dangerous. Those are strong words to use, and so again we have to look at the methodology within a group. Why is it that people take on board a particular worldview? If it's through free choice, fine. If it's not, that's a serious problem.
George, we haven't heard from George yet. I'm over the side now, so we've got to... I'll come along. George.
No, I think throughout this programme we've tended to polarise the discussion, and we've done it right from the start. That what's the difference between a religion and a cult? As if you've got religions there and cults there.
That was the idea that we had in mind. I agree with this gentleman.
Cults brainwash you, it's psychological coercion, it's a charismatic leader.
Well, Francesca was saying from right at the top, there is very little distinction if you look at it. It's just a matter of scale.
But that's what makes it so.
Not everyone's been saying that.
If you looked at the list that you put up at the beginning of the programme, if you take something like Opus Dei, now it's actually part of the Roman Catholic Church. It's been approved by the Pope. It's heavily criticised
around the world,
which is precisely my point. Sorry, can you let me finish, Ian, please?
I'm just responding.
but it's part of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, it's controversial, but it's precisely my point. Which category do you put it in? Is it part of religion, or is it something that's different? And I think we've tended to say, well, religion, mainstream religion has got sensible beliefs. Cults have got these kind of funny beliefs.
We haven't said that. Some people have said that. Some people haven't said that. So I think you're being a little bit selective in your hearing.
And I have to support this gentleman here because in general, the conversation has been the split between religion and cults. And the conversation, what's been said, is a generalization rather than actually address specific areas. And quite frankly, I think this obscures what's really going on. That is to say, if we're trying to find meaning. But if we're just trying to have a little circus here, then we're having it.
What's really interesting about the debate is when I employed, and I know nothing about this gentleman's sexual habits, by the way, but when I employed exactly the same technique, of casting aspersions without any evidence whatsoever, I was called ridiculous. And yet, when this is happening on the front row here, it's thought of as, oh yes, these movements are dangerous. But the fact is, the techniques of criticism are from that side, and they are all generalised. There are one or two absolutely real. There are some real, very important.
Wait. Let's explore a technique in a second. One of the techniques, a cultish practice. We're not talking about groups per se being cults. We're talking about cultish practices within groups, whether they be sects, whether they be parts of religions, or whatever. You've had your hand up for so long.
You were talking about your definition, first of all, of what counts as a cult. A lot of those words that you used are actually subjective, that this is a manipulative. One person's manipulative is another person's selling technique, etc., etc. And you talk about separation, and I'm sure that lots of people have experienced when they belong to established religions and they decide to marry somebody that is not of their faith, and their families get very upset and they don't speak to them, and people won't have green carpets because they're Protestant.
So what's the difference? This was our original contention.
They use separation. All groups, political parties, religions, they all use we know what's best, those people are doing it wrong.
Barbara, tell us about Tom, your son.
Right. My son is involved with an organisation that's based on the internet. It's not a religion. It's run by an atheist who lives in Canada, who is an entrepreneur. He has set up a structure which earns him a living from voluntary donations and subscriptions to the podcasts, the books that he produces.
It's around philosophy, isn't it?
That's
Politics,
right.
philosophy, so-called free thinking.
Apparently the biggest philosophy show on the internet. My son was studying philosophy and critical thinking when he was at school. He was about 16 when he first came across this website. I imagine he Googled philosophy podcasts, and there was an introduction to philosophy by this man who is very charismatic and says unusual things in quite a gripping way. And he can tell you how to be free. He can really help you achieve personal freedom. All you have to do is listen to some of his podcasts, starting at the beginning of 2,500, read his books as well. Voluntary donations, please, because we can't run this without you. Just had a bill for the server. When you listen to the podcasts, it's not so much about philosophy. It's about how evil your parents were, how you were abused as a child because you didn't ask to be born. That was an unequal relationship. Therefore, it's an abusive relationship. It's nothing to do with sexual abuse, physical abuse, beating, whatever, even emotional abuse of raising a voice or shouting at a child or shouting that they're stupid. It can be just asking them to clean their room, asking them to tidy up, lay the table. Very simple things. Do your homework. Things that parents say routinely to their children as they're growing up. That's abusive, apparently. So you should get abusive people out of your life. You should only have voluntary relationships. And that means you should cut yourself off from your parents.
How long since you've seen Tom?
4 years. 4 years this month, in fact. He's alive and well. I'm not sure what part of the country he's in anymore. He's very much involved with this organisation still. He's close friends with some of the inner circle, and I can't see him coming out of it as long as this charismatic leader is still alive. The advert for the show, it's growing very popular in across the world, not just in America and Canada, where it's largely based, but also in the UK, Australia, Europe. It's like an internet radio show. So there's a weekly show, which is live on Sunday evening. There's podcasts.
I bet Rod can enlighten us further here, Barbara. It's an incredibly powerful story. We were saying earlier on, the brain can be very malleable and very vulnerable, and Tom, paradoxically, was studying critical thinking. Yes. But all the critical faculties seem to just disintegrate in some... Are we all vulnerable?
I think all people are vulnerable to being manipulated and to also having their psychology taken over by any group or organisation, and it can be a religious group or it can be a political group.
Why might this particularly hit home with Tom?
Because it offers ultimate truths, and on their own there's nothing wrong with that, but if that means cutting yourself off from your family, cutting yourself off from your career, giving your possessions away, if it takes over your life. The evidence is now becoming very clear in the literature that when groups take over in that way, when they become totalistic, that has a serious psychological effect on individuals, as well as destroying their life chances over the period during which they're involved. And the question to that group, the same to any other organisation, in my view, is what are you doing to look after your members? Now, the fact is that the law doesn't apply equally at the moment to voluntary organisations or to religions. The Health and Safety at Work Act, for example, that has the duty
or
of care.
multinational organisations as well.
Multinational. And the fact is that I welcome any organisation that says that it's prepared to open itself up to that scrutiny, that says that it'll allow...
Which Simon has to you this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I welcome that.
And the Raelians have as well.
But I would say that those groups that don't, those groups that try and allow the argument to go forward, that somehow their beliefs allow them to do anything to anybody, those are the groups that I would describe as destructive cults, because they elevate belief beyond anything, and it actually doesn't matter anymore the effect that has on people.
I agree with him. I think that there's no system of checks and balances within these groups, and I think that people are afraid to step on their toes, step on people's religious right to religious freedom, and yet forget about the effect that if you have the right to believe whatever you want, but the moment that your belief infringes on another's
I'm going to give you the last
rights.
word, Cole, on this. Your thoughts?
Well,
40 seconds.
My thoughts are there will be people sitting at home thinking, well, I sort of believe in God, and I sort of I'm looking for truth in my life. But what I've heard today is a great number of people are all saying, I've got the truth because Jesus told me individually. And actually, what I look for in a belief system is a belief system that's about personal freedom, but also about community and belonging, and allows me to express that and to also have an appreciation for the people around me who might have different belief systems. I've heard that this morning from some of the people who are in this room, and I've not heard it from others, and those are the ones that concern me.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. As ever, the debate continues on Twitter, online. We're not on next week because it's Whitsun. We'll be in Glasgow June the 3rd. From now, goodbye from everyone here in London, and thank you very much for watching.